Good morning, Chair and members of Council. Before we get started with the presentation, I just wanted to acknowledge that for some of the incoming council members, you all participated in a series of meetings regarding the land development code rewrite, and some of that information you're going to see again today. What we're presenting today is basically a high-level overview of what it is, why it's important, and what are our next steps. And following the retreat, we'll be reaching out individually to each. But without further ado, I'm going to turn it over.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, great. Just wanted to check. To be with you virtually and appreciate your attention. With me this morning was Craig Richardson, also with Clarion Associates, our office in Chapel Hill, North Carolina. To provide the overview for you this morning. This is the flow of our presentation. We'll take about a half an hour and then look forward to engaging with you on any questions you have. So first, we'd like to provide some background, what rewrite. So we'd like to talk about how the draft land development code it accomplishes those goals. And that'll be at a fairly high level. Hello.
Hey, Ken. This is Ashley.
Hi, Ashley.
We can hear you, but we cannot hear Craig. Can you try to just take over the presentation?
Yeah. Oh, yeah, sure. You can't hear Craig, huh? Okay. I could do that. I can hear him fine, but okay. Sure thing.
Okay.
All right. Craig, Ashley tells me they can hear me, but they can't hear you. So I'll just take over, I guess.
I mean, I don't know what else we can do.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm sorry.
Try to have Mr. Livingston say something.
Craig,
Morning, this is Livingston. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you. Can you hear me?
Yes, but Craig was breaking up earlier when he was trying to present.
But now he's okay.
Well, do you want me to try to go ahead and continue? And if I continue to break up, Tim will just take over from me. Will that be okay?
hey, Craig, this is Kyle from IT. Would you try disconnecting and reconnecting again? I'm hearing some breaking up from you as well, but I'm off site.
Okay.
I'll just take it from here. Given the short time we have this morning, I'll just cover these initial slides, if that's okay. If you all can hear me all right.
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, great. I could hear Craig fine, so something in the cyberspace is off, but we'll go with it. That's what we do these days. So Craig was talking about what exactly is the land development code, and he was talking about the zoning regulations, how they include the different zoning districts that divide the unincorporated county into different districts, have different rules that apply for where buildings can be located, how tall they can be, also what types of uses can be established in the different zoning districts. Then you have these rules, as Craig was mentioning, parking, these sort of site development standards that govern, I won't say how good the development has to be, what the development has to look like, and how it has to function. And then you have the land development regulations, which govern how land is subdivided within the county, the unincorporated county. Then you also have the development regulations, things that regulate stormwater, and other water quality regulations. So you have all of these in this one chapter 26, which is the land development code. So then the next question is, well, why rewrite the land development code? Well, the current code was adopted in 2005, and so it's been operating now for going on 15 years, going on 16 years. Plan Richland County is the comprehensive plan that the county adopted in 2015, which set new policy direction for land development in the county. In other words, how moving forward does the community want land to develop? And there's some very clear direction in Plan Richland County to that end. So in order to update the land development code and to implement the policy direction in Plan Richland County, the county embarked on this project to rewrite the LDC. And it's a multi-year project, started in 2017, and it includes the 5 tasks that you see on this slide. We have completed 4 of the 5 tasks. So now we are on task 5. And at the end of the slideshow, or the presentation, I'll talk a little bit more about what's going to be happening and is happening in task 5 as we move towards a public hearing draft of the land development code. So at this point then, we framed the rest of our presentation this morning to try and talk about project status, not in terms of tasks, but more in terms of the substantive changes in the land development code. And those changes really are organized or can be discussed under these 5 project goals. And so those are creating a user-friendly code, implementing Plan Richland County, realigning and modernizing the districts and the use regulations, modernizing the development standards, and encouraging green development practices. And so the why rewrite the land development code is, we talked about the initial impetus in the previous slide, but the real why rewrite the land development code is really addressed with these 5 main objectives. What are we trying to accomplish with this rewrite? So creating a user-friendly code. This has to do with a number of things: how the ordinance is organized, and what the structure of the ordinance is, and also things like the layout of the ordinance, how graphics are incorporated into the regulations to communicate to users what the rules are and what the specific zoning or subdivision regulations are. Oftentimes it's easier for people to understand some of these things in a more graphic format. Also other components that make a code more user-friendly are hyperlinked cross-references, tables of contents, page headers and footers that allow people to keep track of where they are in the document and how what they're reading right now relates to other material, how it fits into the overall regulations. Also the type of language that's used. Is it clear? Is it precise? Also under this goal of user friendliness are the review procedures, and this has to do with the actual process of development and how developers and the community move through that process. So to that end, then there are some specific changes that were proposed and that we have included in the draft land development code. And I'm going to talk about those at a fairly high level because I want to get to the other 4 goals. But some of the changes include a summary table of development review responsibilities. In other words, who reviews what, and is it a recommendation? Is it a final decision? So there's a table that really summarizes all that and makes it easy for someone to see in the ordinance who has what review responsibilities, what bodies or officials have what review responsibilities. Also, including standard review procedures. These procedures are common to many of the development applications. Everyone has to submit an application, so those procedures are very similar from one application to another. So most modern development codes include a set of standard procedures that pull those out so they're not repeated over and over in the procedures section. And then, each application type, well, I should mention standard procedures also include things like neighborhood meetings and pre-application conferences, which can be very helpful for some of these types of applications as far as really laying the groundwork for the development and making sure that there's an opportunity provided for the community to engage with the developer up front before a lot of investment has been made on the development project. So, and then in addition to those standard procedures, then of course you have procedures for each type of development. And those have been, those follow a basic pattern, a logical pattern, which is the purpose for the procedure, what the procedure is, and that draws on the standard procedures. And then what standards does the reviewer, the decision maker, need to base their decision on? And, there are a number of targeted improvements in the Land Development Code. One of them is to simplify the land development review procedure, changing it from a 3-tier to a 2-tiered review. In other words, simplifying that review. And I would like to get into more detail about that, but I see that my time is quickly running out and I'm still on my first goal. So I'm going to push through, say we've updated the plan development procedure. We've included a new tree removal permit, and there's a new administrative adjustment procedure. These are all changes, specific changes to procedures that were discussed in the code assessment. So these are all things that have been done in the draft land development code, all with the end goal of making the code easier for people to use, easier for people to understand what the regulations are. I'd like to spend a little more time on the implementation goal. This was a major impetus for the land development code rewrite, was to implement Plan Richland County. And the code assessment identifies some really core policy direction in Plan Richland County. And I'd like to go through each of these.
While listening to music.
I'd like to go through each of these briefly and talk about some of the major changes in the land development code that address that implement the policy direction. So number one, support redevelopment and investment in commercial corridors and employment centers. In order to do this, the new land development code includes new walkable mixed-use corridor district called the MU2 district. That's the corridor mixed-use district, which incentivizes mixed-use development and creates a more walkable environment. It also includes a new employment district, a new institutional district, and a new planned development employment campus district. And that district encourages or requires use mixing and has specific requirements for access and mobility and connectivity within the site and external site access. In addition to these new districts to help support redevelopment and investment in these commercial corridors and employment centers, we've also included some more tailored and flexible, and in some cases simplified, development standards, specifically the parking standards. Whereas you had a sort of one-size-fits-all set of parking standards in all areas of the county in the current land development code, the new code has two sets of standards, one that applies specifically in the mixed-use corridor and the community mixed-use district, the MU2 and the MU3 districts, which is generally lower. In other words, less parking is required in these areas, with the understanding that there will be more walkable, less auto-centric development patterns. It also carries forward and simplifies some of the landscaping provisions, such as the buffer yard requirements, which also include width reduction options. So all of this is to provide a more tailored and flexible approach to some of these site design requirements that in some cases might be a barrier to redevelopment and investment in these areas. So that's the first main thing, first main direction in Plan Richland County. The second talks about supporting redevelopment and infill development generally, not just in these specific corridors and employment centers. And to that end, the Land Development Code includes some general contextual compatibility standards. And these apply to lot width and setbacks. And what they do is they allow for a modification of the lot width and setback standards in a particular district where existing development might deviate from those. And this provides some flexibility and also continuity of the basic development pattern and character in these districts, in any district, really. These apply generally. Secondly, flexibility provisions for off-street parking have been expanded. In other words, there are more ways that you can meet the off-street parking requirements in the new Land Development Code, new alternatives. Also, the alternative landscaping plan provisions have been carried forward and refined, so that a developer could propose different ways of accomplishing the landscaping requirements. There's also a new administrative adjustment procedure. And what this does is it allows for up to a 10% deviation from very specified standards if criteria are met. And that deviation can be approved administratively without having to go through a lengthy process involving a review board. But again, a very targeted application and very specific criteria. Number 3 has to do with providing a range of housing choices. And to accomplish that, the Land Development Code includes new types of housing to allow a broader range of housing, such as fourplexes or live-work dwellings. Another feature which we've talked about in the past is transitioning to density-based zoning. In other words, in many of these residential districts, the minimum lot size has been eliminated. There's no minimum lot size, there's a minimum lot width, which would preserve the character of the district. As you walked through it, you would see some consistency in lot width, but there's no minimum lot area. But there is a maximum density. That provides some flexibility and allows for some variety of of housing within a development in any of these districts. Multifamily, new mixed use districts that I mentioned, the MU2 and the MU3, allow multifamily and mixed use development. In other words, non-residential and residential development in the same building or in the same development. And then the new planned development district for traditional neighborhood design provides a planned development district for this traditional form of neighborhood design. So it's another alternative for housing. Protecting and enhancing rural character. And this is one we could talk a lot about, and I hope that you'll have some questions about this. The new AG district is a district that is a true agricultural district. We've also included agricultural compatibility standards. The rural crossroads district carries forward the current rural commercial district with some modifications. And those modifications are the minimum lot size is actually smaller now. So you can have a smaller lot in this district. But the maximum gross floor area has been reduced somewhat. But that also is balanced out by the range of uses that are allowed in the rural crossroads district, which is actually expanded from the current rural commercial district. The conservation development standards also, those include some of the open space design provisions in the current land development code, but they include basic design standards to ensure that the sensitive environmental areas are protected. There are also development area standards that address site layout, arranging dwellings in clusters, maximizing the amount of contiguous natural area that's left intact within the development, and then preserving views of protected areas from within the development. And so these are all new in the land development code to help protect rural character within the county. Protecting natural resources in a balanced manner. I mentioned the conservation development standards. Also, the water quality provisions are carried forward, including water quality buffers and the water resources overlay district. Tree protection standards have been strengthened somewhat. I won't get into the details of that, but there are some refinements in the tree protection standards, including a new tree removal permit procedure. And then there are new green development incentives. Ensuring compatibility between military bases and surrounding areas. The main change in that regard, and besides the new AG district, is the military installation overlay district, which is based on the Joint Land Use Study Implementation Plan recommendations. And then finally, aligning regulations on the edge of jurisdictional boundaries. And use and development standards were aligned where it made sense with those in the neighboring jurisdictions. And I realize that I'm just about out of time and I'm only on goal 3, but I did want to spend the bulk of my time talking about implementing Plan Richland County, because I think that's really a core goal of this project. And honestly, a lot of the zoning district changes I've discussed already, but in summary, the current 19 base districts, which include 2 planned development districts, are now, 19 base districts there are 19 base districts in the new land development code as well. So the number of base zoning districts is the same. However, what that doesn't tell you is that some of the current districts were consolidated or not carried forward, and new districts have been introduced, some of which I've discussed with you. 2 planned development districts in the current land development code. Now there are 3 planned development districts. One of the current planned development districts was not carried forward, one was, and there are 2 new planned development districts. And then where there are 7 overlay districts in the current land development code, there are now 5 overlay districts. So it's a different organization, and that's all laid out in the code assessment. The new districts are the agricultural district, corridor mixed use, community mixed use, employment district, the institutional district, the planned development employment campus district, the planned development traditional neighborhood design district, and the military installation overlay districts. I think I've discussed each one of those under the previous goals. The layout is changed and modernized, so you have a 2-page spread that's much more graphically rich and shows how the really provides a snapshot for each zoning district with the core zoning regulations that apply in each district. Some of the districts include specific form standards that address things like off-street parking, location, sidewalks and connectivity, building configuration, and orientation and design. As far as the use regulations, they are now organized. The general organization is principal uses, accessory uses, and temporary uses. And then within those main headings, there are use tables for each of those types of uses that indicate what uses are allowed in what districts and what permission is required to establish the use, or what procedure would have to be followed to establish the use. Many uses were consolidated. You'll see that the use table is smaller in the land development code, the draft land development code, than the current one. And that's because many uses were consolidated, in particular the commercial uses and the industrial uses. It doesn't slice as thinly in distinguishing between different types of, for example, retail uses or manufacturing uses. And then some new uses have been added, in particular, agricultural support type of uses. So many changes and refinements in the use regulations. All the uses are defined in a 3-tier, using a 3-tier organization. Use classifications, use categories, and then individual uses. As far as modernizing the development standards, I realize I am out of time, so I'm not going to be able to step through all of these the way that I would like, but there are a number of new standards: open space set-asides, neighborhood compatibility, agricultural compatibility, design-informed standards, and conservation development. And many of you have heard in previous presentations about each of these. Open space set-asides require a minimum amount of open space in new development, in all new development, in all districts. There are some exceptions to the open space requirement. And it varies depending on the district and depending on the use proposed. The neighborhood compatibility districts address situations where new development, new multifamily, non-residential, or mixed-use development comes in adjacent to an existing single-family home or a vacant lot in a single-family district. There are specific requirements that apply to address potential impacts, whether that be building heights, building location, parking location, operational standards, lighting, all designed to reduce the impact on existing single-family residential development. Agricultural compatibility standards, the graphic that you see in the middle bottom is from the Land Development Code, and there are requirements that apply to new development new residential development that comes in next to an active agricultural use within the AG district or adjacent to the AG district. And so the intent of these standards is to minimize the conflicts between the existing agricultural use and the new residential use. So there is a buffer requirement and a number of other requirements. Design informed standards, these apply generally throughout the county, and there are multifamily design informed standards that apply to all multifamily development. There are also mixed use commercial and light industrial form and design standards. Excuse me.
This is Livingston. Because of time, I want to ask you to try to wrap it up for us so we have some time for some questions. Also, too, we'll definitely be having some workshops specifically dealing with a lot of the details that you're talking about also. So
Yeah.
Comprehend all of this in this one particular meeting.
Absolutely. Yes. Thank you. I will wrap up. Conservation development, I've spoken with you about that already. Again, I realize this is a lot of material coming at you fairly quickly, but it's at a somewhat higher level, and we're happy to dive into each of these areas if you have specific questions. Finally, encouraging green development practices. I mentioned the green building incentives. So these incentives include an increase in height, increase in density, decrease in the lot, in the minimum lot area, or a reduction in parking. And a developer could achieve those incentives by including a green building features in their development. There's a menu of green building features that address things like energy conservation, water conservation, sustainable building materials. So that's the 5th goal. So these are all key goals of the Land Development Code. And I've run through very quickly with you how the new Land Development Code is addressing each of those goals. I mentioned earlier, there are 5 tasks. We are on the 5th of 5 tasks. What this task involves really is consolidating all of the input on the previously drafted material. And your staff is in the process of doing that and will be transmitting to us a set of revisions to finalize the document into a public hearing draft. A parallel project is finalizing and updating the zoning map. So there are a number of new zoning districts in the new Land Development Code, and some districts that aren't carried forward into the new Land Development Code. And the zoning map, of course, has to be consistent with the zoning ordinance. And so your staff is currently working on a revised zoning map, and we'll be talking more with you about that in the future. And then once we have made those edits and revisions, then we will have a public hearing draft that you can move forward into the public hearing process. I appreciate your time, your attention, and your time this morning, especially as we work through some of our technical issues. And at this point, then, we welcome your questions and discussion on the Land Development Code.
And let me just say to my colleagues, if there are any general specific questions for information, that's fine. But keep in mind, we'll have workshops to follow up with this for details. Ms. Mallon, you recognize.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Tim, as you know, I attended several, I'd say, or some of the meetings that you previously held on Zoom. And I see all of a sudden we're at task 5, preparing a public hearing document. I'm not sure how many of my colleagues have even seen the previous tasks 2, 3, and 4 in here, yet it shows that they're all completed. I know that I asked several questions during those Zoom meetings. I don't know that any of those answers, those questions and or answers were provided in some type of a comprehensive draft that gave us all that information to include other questions that my colleagues maybe had either at meetings or outside of meetings. And it seems like as a council, especially with over 45% of it being new members, that we should be getting all of that information so everybody can review it. You're talking about creating a public hearing document, and I'm not so sure that a lot of my colleagues have even seen what's leading up to this particular public hearing document. And I think that maybe the Zoom meetings were the opportunity for us to ask questions and be maybe given some answers there, but at least it placated us so that we thought we were getting answers. But I haven't seen anything that shows any type of changes from questions that were asked by this council. All I'm seeing now is that y'all are preparing a final public hearing document, yet I don't know that this council has looked at anything that's going to make that determination if it's if we want that to be at the public hearing document. So those are my thoughts on it. I think that you're moving along without total input. Thank you.
Sure, and I'd be happy to respond. I appreciate that comment. I knew that there are a number of new council members, and we definitely want them to, well, generally, we recognize that the county council will adopt the new land development code when they are comfortable adopting the new land development code. And so, you know, it will be ready when you say it's ready. You know, that being said, I mentioned that staff is assembling a spreadsheet that tracks all of the comments received on the comprehensive draft. I'm sorry, the consolidated draft. And I don't think that there would be any issue with them making that spreadsheet available to council members. We have noted comments in our meetings on the consolidated draft under task 3, the testing under task 4. Those meetings occurred in the fall of last year. And so, so those have been recorded, and I think it's probably not a bad idea to make those available to council members, but I appreciate your comments, Mr. Malinowski, and want to assure you that we recognize that the council needs to understand and be comfortable with this ordinance.
Thank you, Tim. I think Mr. Malinowski got his answer now.
Mr. Chair, if I could just add to that.
Yeah, go ahead.
In terms of, Tim's correct, we're currently doing the technical analysis, which includes looking at past council decisions and how those impact how we are going to present a zoning map going forward. We've also gotten your feedback from various sessions. We've gotten feedback from our stakeholder groups, which have been generally positive, and we're compiling all of that to talk with Clarion and Tim about all of that feedback. So we're compiling it right now. Our plan next steps, like I said, was for us to meet with all of you individually to go over that and talk about your individual districts. We will also have public input time before we even get to the public hearing process. So we'll have an entire month, hopefully, where we'll be going on various zoning roadshows around the community to present all of that. So you will have first chance to review all that individually. We'll be coming back to you together as a group, and we'll also be going out to the public during that time before we even get to potential adoption. So I just want to clarify that.
Thank you, Mr. Boyer.
Let me just quickly say one thing that would be helpful for me, in particular when I'm speaking with my constituents, and that is if you can say, here are the new zoning districts, and give me
be having some outdoor type engagement with the community where they can come, they can ask questions. It'll be high level, but we're also giving them an opportunity to meet with us, perhaps in 15 or 30-minute increments where they can sign up, and we can also talk to them one-on-one if they have any specific questions that they want answered.
As a follow-up to that, may I? Briefly, this is a evolving process, but begin again?
Yes, so in the March timeframe is when
March.
we anticipate, as soon as we're using the next month to meet with you all individually and refine those recommendations and the feedback that we got from you, as well as incorporating our analysis as well. So we're using February for that month. In March, we'll be looking to do the roadshows.
Thank you. Thank you.
Ms. English?
Good morning. Thank you for that presentation. I am particularly interested in to protect and enhance rural character. And just for me, I know my district is largely rural, and I'd like to know what parameters are used to define that, what qualifies for agriculture, so I can explain that. And I know we may not be able to do it now, but at a later date, I would love to get with you guys to just kind of go over that.
Absolutely. We can definitely cover that when we meet with you individually and your specific concerns and questions about what those parameters are.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm sorry, Ms. Teresa.
Thank you. My question is, again, more about public engagement and public awareness. Have we considered talking with the library? I know they have like some teletown hall capabilities, and also our library locations could be a great way if the library would offer space to put some visuals out so that people can see simplified, comparisons, what it was before, what it's going to be now.
Sure. One thing that we're doing is partnering with our government and community services department, who has ready access to those types of community stakeholders, and they're more experienced, quite frankly, in engaging the public through the library and some of those other community stakeholders. So we've actually had them review our plan for engagement. They're going to be participating to help facilitating some of that, as well as bringing in some of those community partners.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Bring us to a break time.
You can take a break, Mr. Chair, while we get set up for the next presentation. And I'll talk about the agenda, and then we'll move on to the next item.
All righty, we'll take 10. I forgot, I better give y'all a specific time. We'll start back at 10 o'clock.
Briefly from our event host, the Township Auditorium, introduce you to the Executive Director, who's one of our community partners, tell you a little bit about himself and the Township Auditorium. Immediately following that, I'll cover the information that I presented to you on your table there, a little bit about some of my views related to some opportunities for Richland County. After that, you have your executive session item for personnel matters. I believe you have updates that are scheduled. Those updates specifically deal with the county attorney's office and the clerk to council, I believe. And then that will conclude your agenda. So that is the plan for the continuation of this process. I certainly expect that you will be out of here much before the time as only your printed agenda, but I want to go ahead and give you that information right now. So with that being said, I'm going to ask the Executive Director of the Township Auditorium to come forward, introduce himself, give you a little bit of history related to Richland County and the Township Auditorium. Certainly appreciate everybody having their mics on, but if you're not speaking, if you turn your mic off, because it is picking up really well.
And red means it's on.
What?
Yes, red means it's on.
So what is this?
That's important. Because I know y'all take red means stop, you know, but.
Usually.
Testing.
I turned mine off to say something I didn't want nobody to hear.
Testing.
Turn it on.
That's right.
Additional mic? That's an additional mic.
Yeah,
but it's
I
on.
guess they got
so
you
it was on
twice.
the whole time, yeah.
All right, good. Good morning to everyone.
Good morning.
My name is Andre Hallman. I'm the Executive Director / General Manager of the Township Auditorium. We appreciate being the host for you guys to have your, so you can say an event with your retreat here today. Just a quick brief history of the Township Auditorium. This building opened in 1930. It was built for a whopping $300,000. So a lot of history. The stage that you guys are on now, Louis Armstrong played here in 1941. Elvis in 56, and the list go on and on. Prince played here as an open act for Ashwood and Simpson in 1978. The ticket was $6.50 in advance, $7.50 the day of the show. And we have countless other memorabilia, such as James Brown, Gladys Knight, and Phipps. And all those ticket prices were like $2.50 in advance, $3 the day of the show. So the Township Auditorium, of course, is owned by Richland County. We have a governing board that's appointed by County Council that I answer to, that certainly helps us with our policies. But like any other venues across the country, we've been going through some challenges because our last event that we had here was last March. We did Jerry Seinfeld. And venues like the Township Auditorium, such as the Clover Centers, my colleagues over there and friends, you know, we haven't had events since last year. So the economic impact of an effect on commercial vendors across this country has been tremendous. We have been tremendously impacted by this. This weekend here is typically we have the United Methodist Conference that's here from Thursday through Sunday. But again, our objective in being a host of an entertainment venue is to put 3,000 people in this place. And unfortunately, because of COVID, we can't. So we appreciate all the support the county has given us. We're going to try to continue to lean on you guys. We are trying to take advantage of some of the opportunity that may be available for grants and things of that nature. This last stimulus package, they line item some monies for that title Save Our Stage. So myself and other venues across the country are going to certainly try to apply for that. So again, we appreciate you guys. I hope that the staff has been very hospitable to you. And if you have any questions at this time, please feel free to ask me.
Any questions?
Yes, sir.
I'm just asking, were there any questions? If not, Mr. Holloman, on behalf of council, we just want to thank you so very, very much for your leadership at the township. You know, it has become a state-of-the-art facility, a destination for many of the folks throughout our community, throughout the state and the United States. So we just want to thank you for what you do.
Thank you. We appreciate you. And just FYI, we're hoping from an industry standard that probably the last quarter of this calendar year that things are going to pick back up. I've got, lots of dates primarily targeting October, November, December. If you look at our marquee, I have events right now on for March and April, but more than likely those shows are going to be forward to the fall because everything is pretty much based on the pandemic and vaccination, because it's going to be a while for people going to start really feeling comfortable being in a place that holds 2, 3, 5, 4, 5,000 seats. Again, I thank you for that. If anything else we can do for you guys, please let me know.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
All right, members of council, I want to just take just a few brief moments to talk about what we hope to accomplish going forward. We do want to get a facilitator specifically in a workshop setting to come and meet with us and help guide us through a strategic plan process. Ideally, what I envision with that process is that there will be a information session that will happen between both members of the council and the staff, hearing input, receiving input, taking that information into consideration, and then walking through the process of developing how the county council looks at Richland County going forward in the future. So that's something we still are going to be doing going forward. However, what I have done in conversation with the chair and the vice chair, once we recognized that the facilitator wasn't going to be able to present, we talked about some of my initial observations and thoughts that I had about goals for Richland County. So what you have before you, I'm going to put a lot of qualifiers on this, is that this is not something that I sat down with other members of council or members of the staff or any members of the community, other organizations or anything like that. These are just some initial observations that when I came in, going through my experiences, hearing information from various individuals throughout the organization and the community, these are things that I picked up on. So I want to make sure I clarify that for anybody who's watching this from the outside and on the inside, that this does not represent what county council has put together or any other members of staff through a coordinated process. So I know it's not like a lot of qualifiers, but it's important to say that because I don't want anybody to walk away as if this went through some sort of organizational process and then this is the output. So let's take a look at a few things here. Let's see.
Your time out on me?
Doesn't look like a projector.
Yeah. Your time out on me?
So council members have this in front of you, but okay. We're going to keep the benefit of those who are in the audience. So just starting with your basic SWOT analysis, right? I'm not going to cover every single item here, but these are some of the things that in terms of strengths that I feel were identifiable and easily see, you can easily see at Richland County. So you certainly have a talented group of individuals who you already employ, right? You already have that. You have a number of dedicated individuals, and you can tell by the seniority within the organization that you have some long tenured individuals. Richland County certainly has some fiscal stability. You can look at some of your financial documents and realize that. Based on some of the other things that Richland County has done just this past year, and certainly in times past, you have the ability to provide additional services because of the talent level of the individuals that you have. So you have that as one of your strengths. You see on here, I talked about you have some historically significant contributions that Richland County has. So that is one of those areas of strength that I think ties Richland County into the community. You have a public who is engaged. So you have members of the community who are interested in what's going on with their county government, right? That's a good thing. You have some established systems. So Richland County has a lot of things that it has established in terms of how it conducts itself. So again, those are some of the things that when I came in and I was looking, I said, you know, these are some things that are strengths for the county. You have some core areas that you can build from. I also listed willingness to follow and develop best practices. Since I've been here, I've heard a lot of conversations at many different levels concerning individuals wanting to figure out and utilize what best practices are and go through that process. So again, I think that is also one of our strengths. And we can go back to these. Again, these are not something that I'm asking for necessarily input on, but certainly as I go through this, if you all want to come back and give me some input, I'm going to take some notes here just for my own benefit. You may not see this in the audience very well, but under weaknesses, I talked about a few things that sometimes you find are not just unique to Richland County, but we do have this, in my opinion, as one of our weaknesses. We have some of our processes and organizational departments that work in silos. We have some individuals in those silos who are very good at what they do, and we are working better across departments, but we are still sometimes separated. And information and individuals and their talents are directly attributed to those departments more than the organization as a whole. Communication, I listed several things under here. So certainly this has increased since COVID, but even before COVID, I was getting questions about the availability of individuals in departments, not any particular person, but just customers calling, getting information saying, I can't get in touch with anybody. I'm not getting a response. And this is not through the Ombudsman's office. This is kind of reports coming through the Ombudsman's office saying, you know, I can't reach people. So I felt like, you know, for good or for bad, individuals are not able to get in contact with us. That's a weakness. Appointed versus elected officials. What I mean by that is there is in some of our employees' thought process, there's a difference between how employees are responsible for certain things based on their status in the organization. So that to me is one of those things where we want employees to make sure they can share information with whomever needs the information, and that the status of the position doesn't determine how you behave. Email. One of the things I have definitely picked up on since I've been here is that we communicate very heavily through email, and there's nothing wrong with that. But it restricts sometimes the ability to get information quickly, to follow up, and sometimes things get lost in the email shuffle. So you get a lot of emails, sometimes things get lost in the email stack. So email is one form of communication that we definitely need to use, but it is primarily seems to be our dominant form of communication, is email. A lack of understanding of the roles. So, and that's in general, that's not one person or one group of individuals. That is an opportunity that I see in terms of, that's a weakness that we can readily address, but it is a weakness that we have. And then our communication with the public. There are opportunities there for us to take on that weakness, but I think that some of you have even pointed out we have an opportunity there, but it is a weakness for us right now. Certainly, unfunded mandates at any level, politics that get wrapped up in the work process. I put complacency or lack of leadership development, deficient infrastructure, and that includes both from a technology standpoint and then a real road infrastructure standpoint. Parking issues, heard a lot about that. Turnover and succession planning. So there are a number of positions that have gone unfilled for a long time. And then when you have additional turnover, it exacerbates that issue. So I feel like that's a weakness for Richland County in the sense that you lose a lot of sometimes brain trust when that happens. Got some antiquated systems. Well, we have some antiquated systems. And then the adaptability, so the willingness to change. There are some slow moving parts there that we really need to improve upon. And I see that as a weakness, especially in an environment where change has now become almost every day. What about our opportunities? I think we have some opportunities in the political arena. For Richland County as the capital city to use its political influence in addressing some of the challenges that we have. And I'm hoping that's something that we can take more advantage of going forward in the future. I think we have some opportunities to improve our technology. Certainly, again, we know in this COVID environment, even today when we're doing some virtual workshops, that's an area that we have to address. If I can give you an example, I believe we were having a meeting and one council member trying to, I believe, provide help to the employees said, you know, every employee needs to have, I believe it was like a computer with a camera, because we were doing a bunch of Zoom meetings. But the majority of our employees don't have computers with cameras. So that would immediately create a financial outlay of funds. So I think it's good, but it just shows again some opportunities that we have in terms of technology to improve that area. Talked about just a greater reach. I think we have a lot of voices at the table, a lot of voices throughout the county that we can leverage to get greater reach to the community. Influence over other counties. We have an opportunity to become a role model. I think Richland County should be a role model county. What prevents us from doing that? I think that's an opportunity for us. We've seen some innovative things, but I think we have an opportunity to be more innovative. I think we have an opportunity to rebrand and rebuild the culture of Richland County. I think that's something that's pretty big. And I'm hoping to see us take advantage of. Again, a few other things here, I won't go over them line by line. You can see them there. Talked here also about public and private partnerships, opportunities in the funding area, improved customer service. Doesn't mean we have bad customer service, but we have the opportunity to be better service across the entirety of the organization and not just in some departments. Vendor diversity and then cultural differences are opportunities that we also have. And then this area of the SWOT analysis, threats. So here's some things that I looked at, some things that I was hearing that I thought these could create problems for us in a large way. So when you have projects that are created by voters or taxpayers that we focus on, but that may not align with our strategic plan. So without a strategic plan telling us what we're going to focus on, we may come up with other initiatives that are driven by outside voices. And so we want to make sure that we align, again, our funds with our priorities in a planned way. You talk about state and federal unfunded mandates. I'll give you an example of that and how that impacts you, and I can give you one real world example today. So if you get a proviso that says the salaries of X number of employees are going to go up, then regardless of whether or not you budgeted for that, if the state requires it, then we have to pay those salaries. So that's just one way, for example, that we have to be aware of how other funding requirements can impact us. And depending on what those mandates are and when they take place, if it draws down from funds that we need, then it can create a potential opportunity for us to not meet our capital projections. Talked about politics, the economy, we're seeing that right now. Unforeseen threats, there are large weather events. Fortunately, we haven't had anything this year. We had a couple scares, but nothing happened this year. System failures. I think some current council persons who are here may be more aware of this than some of the newer members, but we have some significant systems that if those systems fail, then they impact our ability to carry out some core functions of county government. And because those systems are antiquated, which is one of our weaknesses, One of the threats to that is it can really have a catastrophic impact on the organization and the citizens as well. So again, some of those investments in technology can take care of that, but we don't want to have a system failure of that magnitude. A lack of understanding on how to lead and manage. We have some employees who are in positions of, and they struggle from time to time in how to handle some management situations. And those lead sometimes to the county then being embroiled in lawsuits. The threat to that is it takes away money that you had planned to use in other areas. And it potentially continues to take away from your ability to brand yourself in a positive way. So I talked about media, and really the threat there is if they're uninformed. So if they're uninformed, then that can be a challenge for county government. The perception of county government, again, stagnation, lack of leadership development, talked about funding again. And then you can see under opportunities and threats, I have cultural differences. So for me, that is, I look at it as an opportunity. But sometimes in a workplace environment, when people are not willing to be civil with one another, it can cause major problems for the organization. And so we've had some of those issues occur. So that's why I have that actually listed twice. One's under opportunities and one's under threats. And then last, I put silence as golden. And the real threat to that is I've had conversations where individuals, for whatever number of reasons, just have not shared information with you. The problem with that is you need that information. And because you don't have it, you're not able to make decisions where you're informed enough to make a decision that will be conscious of other areas. And so I hope we certainly change that and that we have all of our people more willing to talk to us. But I can tell you that in a lot of respects, if you don't ask, you're not going to get that information because people don't feel comfortable sharing. Are there any questions or anything that you picked out that you want to just touch on before we move on to a couple of potential initiatives that I've kind of outlined here? Okay. So here's some possible initiatives. Based on the information that you looked at in the SWOT, here are some things that potentially could lead to action. So the need for communication, both interdepartmentally and externally, is a possible initiative we could take on. The revitalizing of funding and employee benefits for talent recruitment and retention, and more so, I think, on the retention side right now. Programs for personnel and leadership development, we have some, but when you talk to some departments, some employees just don't get a chance to get trained. And so you may have a portion of employees who are being trained, but you have other ones who, of course, are not able to participate in training based on funding in their departments. Modernization of processes, systems, and procedures. Again, we have some established systems, but some things it's time for us to update. There's some changes we need to update. Again, I won't list all of them here because you have them in front of you. But again, be a regional role model in county government, a desire for innovation and strong branding. These are some initiatives that we could take on. So I kind of, on my own, went through a visioning exercise. And so, as you know, visioning is kind of that ideal thing that you want to see and you hope to accomplish and work your way towards. So I understand if for some people this is pie in the sky, but for me, these are some opportunities that I would like to see come into fruition. That on headlines across the state of South Carolina and potentially nationally, that Richland County achieves excellence. That's something that's associated with us. And under that, my idea would be you would have renovated or replaced all dilapidated county facilities. You would have obtained financial stability. We talked a little bit about that on yesterday, what we think it will take to do that. That we maintain a steady and affordable millage rate. That we receive state and national recognition for innovative programs. That when we set our strategic goals, that we would have met or exceeded those strategic goals, and whether it's 3 years or 5-year goals, that we become a regional leader, and that we've supported regional transportation partnerships so that people have the ability to get in and around Richland County to places of employment, schools, and things of that nature with ease. So again, just some larger visions I would like to see happen. So, what's next? What I would like to be able to do is to actually go through this process with the council. That's really how it's designed to happen, right? So ideally, that's what would happen. We would go through the strategic planning process together. Some of the same things that we were looking at on my end, you all would go through. We would be there listening to you, maybe other elected officials and department heads would be a part of that so that you're getting a comprehensive information from Richland County. And then from there, you would develop these things. So here, okay. I forgot I didn't put those up there. So on the back, I'm sorry for people in the audience, in your packet, members of council, you have a sampling of what some potential goals could look like. So if we were, for example, to determine that fiscal stewardship was a goal of the county, that was one of the areas. We would say we want to exercise sound financial management to build Richland County's resiliency. The objective would be to reduce and keep the county's cost of doing business down. The strategy, this is just one, just an example, would be to pursue technology that improves service while reducing the cost of delivery. So that would be one example of a goal that we could take care of under fiscal stewardship. Under public trust and engagement, again, these are just overall topics that I had. A goal could be to promote robust public engagement that informs and involves the incorporated and unincorporated communities within Richland County. The objective, to expand opportunities to seek input, listen, and respond to residents. The strategy would be that we ensure that communication, outreach, and engagement efforts reach all residents, especially those that have been historically underrepresented. And then just another example that I had on here was under employee engagement. We can have a goal to develop and empower Richland County employees. The objective, simply to develop and retain quality employees. The strategy would be to build leadership and professional skills within our culture. And then, so if you were to adopt those things, for example, let's just say we had adopted under employee engagement that goal. Then we would put our resources towards that. So that may mean increasing training budgets. They may mean doing more larger development courses within Richland County. But either way it goes, we would be aligning what we do with obtaining that goal. So those are just some things that I want to highlight for you so that when we go through our process as a whole, you can get an idea of some of the things that I'm hoping to accomplish, and you would have some initial insight into some of my thoughts on how we can move forward at Richland County. So, Mr. Chair, that concludes the information I want to share with you all, but I certainly have take any questions that you all may have on any of the information that I've shared with you this morning.
Thank you very much, Mr. Brown. Any follow-up questions, observations? Mrs. Barron and then Ms. Mackey.
Mr. Brown, thank you so much. This is to at least lay the foundation for this work to be started. I personally would, as coming in new with this, and it's, traditionally organizations get together December, January, and they forecast for the year. And I know that you said these are just this is a sample, you call it a sampling of potential goals. Do you have any that you would like to recommend to us as we move forward with the remainder of this year?
I can do that. What I was hoping to accomplish before the facilitator was able to participate is I did not want to, I mentioned this to a few of council members, I really wanted it to be a synergistic relationship between the administrator and county council. And so I was hoping for us to begin to develop that ideal structure where the board, the policymaking body, sets the tone and the administrator carries out. And so I did not want to put my thoughts in front of what the body was hoping to accomplish. So yes, ma'am, I have some things kind of on the side. I was hoping to sprinkle in, and you always say, okay, that's good, let's do that. And these are some of those examples. So I'm giving you some direct examples of things that I have as goals. So I can include more, but again, that's why I did it that way.
So, Mr. Chair, as a follow-up, is this something that we plan to do are we taking this on as a recommendation as a council, that we would get together and do exactly what Mr. Brown is asking for us to come together and organize he called it a board, but as a council, and then allow him to move forward with these items?
Yes, and that's what Mr. Brown mentioned early on. He talked about a future strategic planning session with council, and these are the kind of things that we'll deal with in that particular session. Remember, we had hoped to do some of that today, but facilitator was not able to meet with us. So yeah, so we plan to do a meeting real soon, looking at the strategic plan, and this at least give us a foundation to work with.
Yes, ma'am.
Ms. Mackey, yes.
Yeah, that was really my question, is just timing. So I know we were not able to have the facilitator here today, but did we reschedule with a facilitator, and do we have a plan of when this will happen? Is it going to be first quarter, second quarter? What is our plan?
Yes, ma'am. So I don't believe we have rescheduled, but yes, the plan is to reschedule with that facilitator. If we can't use that facilitator, another facilitator, because again, that's something I think I know we need to have happen. But I hope to answer that question more specifically here shortly.
I have, you through Ms. Mackey? I have Newton and then Walker.
No.
Oh.
Go ahead, Ms. Newton.
Thank you, Mr. Brown. I'm always excited by strategic planning. My question for you is part of the question that I asked about yesterday. So certainly wholeheartedly endorsing that we come together, we plan, and we talk about how we want to move forward. At the same time, in your role as administrator, there are initiatives that you're working on now that you've already identified as being extremely important, that have taken your time over the past few years and priorities moving forward. And so from my perspective, in addition to this planning process, I would just like to know what, unaided by us, you consider to be some of the strategic priorities that you're trying to make happen right now.
Yeah, so a couple of those things would be, one, and I think you've seen a couple of those things, is to establish what our fiscal trajectory is going to be, and specifically looking at and making decisions on how we allocate the resources that we currently have. So those are some of the things I was working on and I shared in previous council as well. Also, part of that is updating the current procedures that we use in various parts of the organization. And so in addition to that, it's trying to actually fill those positions that are of key significance to the county. It's also working with other community agencies to try to figure out, when we have co-joined situations, how to best navigate that. So that includes some of the major projects you've already been dealing with. That's your sewer, that's some airport, that's some transportation, that's also a little bit of some legal involved in that, in terms of dealing with multiple agencies that have a similar challenge. So specifically, developing those relationships with other organizations that are impacted by us and we're impacting them, working through the employment issues, working through the financial issues, and I'm calling them issues just in general, and then also working through the larger structure of getting things aligned. So for me, this past cycle has been about understanding what we're doing, trying to understand what we're doing, and then trying to begin to align from my perspective, what we should be doing with what we're doing and where we're going. So this is a continuation of that. So those are some of the bigger things that I've been working on, and they're really some of the larger issues that have been really forefront since I got here. Yes, ma'am.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Chair. Mr. Brown, it's as much a follow-up on what Ms. Newton was saying, but maybe a little more direct from just my experience node, so to speak. So I like the board CEO analogy. I think it's appropriate. And of the many boards that I've been a part of, 100% of the CEOs that we have governed come to us as a board with strategic initiatives. We've been through strategic planning exercises as a council many times in the past. I'm sure some of my colleagues are ready to point that out. But what I would suggest from an efficiency perspective is that you as the CEO bring forward your strategic initiatives as you see them as the day-to-day administrator of the governance of this county, and that we help allocate resources, mold policy, set parameters on those strategic initiatives, and potentially add to or reprioritize depending on the will of the body. But it would be my suggestion as an individual, from my experience with various boards, CEOs, and other governing positions, that you put forward the strategic initiatives that you would like to see accomplished during the course of this year, and that we mold from there. It's just a recommendation. I've seen it work in the past. It's typically how boards govern CEOs, and it's how I would suggest we're set up to govern with you. So, thank you.
Mr. Brown, this has been very helpful. And in fact, I'm kind of glad that the facilitator was here. I think that you've given us a lot to think about. But given this isn't a normal board, this is a political board. And that I think that your guidance is very important. And at the same time, I think that you've outlined some really good issues that we need to address. But as a policy board, as a legislative board, we would have to make those decisions in terms of focus. I know you do the management of it, but in terms of coding and things, and other mandates, which may be a part of some of these decisions. And I agree with my colleagues in terms of your foundation that you've given is excellent. But I also know that just as important is that we need to, as you have already suggested, provide input to you. So I think that a combination of the two, as you have suggested, would be the best move. And this is my personal opinion, that we need to go. Thank you.
I just want to kind of reiterate Mr. Walker's comment, and that is, Mr. Walker, this is the reason why once we realized that the facilitator will not be with us, this is the reason why we sat down with Mr. Brown and talked about proceeding with this particular approach, so that way we can get these kind of things on the table, because he is our administrator, and he would have a closer look at a lot of these things, and more so than even more so than us, some of these things. So that's the reason why I thought it was important for us to move forward with this. So I would agree in terms of what I think the role of the administrator of the CEO ought to be. Any other comments? Ms. Newton, you recognize.
Just to echo and go back to something that you said, that you did have these other things that you had already outlined that you were going to share with us as well.
Yes, ma'am.
Any other questions? If not, Mr. Brown, thank you very, very much. We will certainly follow up.
All right, thank you. Okay.
What time is it? And again, as you may recall, we moved our time up simply because we know that it would have taken more time had the presenter been here. So we're going to go ahead on and move forward with the item regarding personnel matters, position updates. Mrs. Newton is going to present that. She is the chair of the Evaluation Oversight Committee. She's going to start out just giving us an update in terms of where we are, in terms of the clerk search, and in terms of where we're going with that. If there's any questions about specific applicants or this or that, things of that nature, we'll go into executive session. We may not have to go into executive session because we're eventually going to be meeting and talking about those later on. And then also just kind of where we are in terms of trying to move forward with the hiring of a new county attorney. So as chair of that committee, I've asked Ms. Newton to give us an update. And at some point, if I think you have a question that we need to go in executive session, you got to have it today, we'll make that decision at that time.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you, colleagues. First, let me start by saying that at the end of this update, there's going to be an ask, and that ask is that you take a look at your calendars, if you haven't done so already, to let me and Mrs. Mack know your availability over the next 2 weeks for interviews for the clerk to council. So I just mention that to you because whenever you're going to ask for something, it's good to tell people up front, and that is what I'll be asking you about. You also have emails from me that I sent out on Wednesday that also provide updates on these positions as well. So there are 2 positions, as you know. First, for the clerk to council position, as you are aware, we have been working with Find Great People to help us in recruiting candidates for those positions. We had initial interviews. We reviewed applicants for the position. We narrowed those down to candidates that we had initial interviews with, and now there are 4 finalists that are going to receive an additional interview. As with any council committee meeting, all council members are always welcome and invited to attend, and particularly when there are personnel matters, we would love for you to be there. So the hope is that either next week or a combination of next week and the following week, that we could conduct those final 4 interviews, which if we follow the process that we use, for example, with the administrator, after that, that would allow us to come together as a council and to take a vote on the person to whom we wanted to extend an offer. So I will just pause there and see if there are any questions on that.
Any questions?
The second position is the county attorney position, and where council left things before is that full council voted to give the Employee Evaluation and Oversight Ad Hoc Committee the authority to determine a process to move forward with that. For previous positions of that nature, we have used outside recruiting firms to work with us on that process. We, of course, have that option in addition to, as we always have, doing an internal process as well. I know that I've had conversations with most of you individually just to update you on where we are and to get your thoughts. And so where we are right now is that my hope is that at our next evaluation and ad hoc committee meeting, we could determine how we wanted to move forward with that process. Again, whether we want to use an outside recruiting firm, and if so, if we want to use one of the firms that is currently available to us on state contract or expand beyond that, if we'd like to do an internal process or some other process. Again, in my email to everyone, and particularly those on the committee, I did ask for availability for meeting times. Perhaps February 9th, which is our first full day of regular council meetings, would be a convenient time for everyone. But again, I would request information from you on your availability for that.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Ms. Newton, and this is something that doesn't need to be answered now, but I just put it out there. I don't know if there are state or county laws that are in place stating that the attorney is something that is under the responsibility of the council in the administrator council form of government. But when I see the attorney spending a lot of time, and rightfully so, with other departments and matters that come forward on behalf of the overall county and its departments, I'm wondering why this position maybe wouldn't be one that, not trying to put any additional burdens on the administrator, but wouldn't come under the administrator's purview. versus county council. So and we may need a legal answer for that when we meet at this next meeting. So thank you.
I will inquire with our legal department about the legal requirements for that. I think I know the answer, but I would rather just have our experts opine.
Any other questions for that? And those of you,
Mr. Livingston, I can't hear you. I can't hear you.
because my mic's not on, thank you. And remember, several of you have been appointed to the Evaluation and Oversight Committee. Expect you to participate, but keep in mind, every council member is invited to every committee meeting, so please feel free to attend and participate in that meeting if you wish to. You would not be a voting member of that committee, but you certainly can participate. So don't use that as an excuse not to participate in my forum.
Then if there are no other questions, just to make sure I keep my promises, I told you when I started that there was going to be an ask at the end when I was done. We're now at the end, and so my ask again is if you haven't consulted your calendar, if you would just take a few minutes to do so, you can either send me and our recruiter, Ms. Mack at Find Great People, your availability. I would be happy to sidle up to you in a socially distanced way and write those times down myself if that's more convenient, but we are trying to coordinate schedules for 11 very busy people, and so in order to coordinate, the sooner we get the information from you, the more efficient we're able to be and the more respectful for your time. Thank you, and thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. Let me also thank Mrs. Newton for her leadership and effort regarding the Evaluation and Oversight Committee. Mr. Malinowski? Thank you. All right. Anything else? I know y'all going to not be happy about this, but actually this concludes what we're planning to schedule and complete for our retreat. So let me open up this time for final comments, conclusions, observations, or whatever one desire. Y'all want to go, huh?
Mr. Livingston?
I'm sorry.
I don't want to delay.
No, go ahead. You're not delaying. We're early. Go ahead.
So there was an executive session scheduled. Does that no longer?
Yeah, I mentioned earlier that if that was needed based on any particular questions about those positions regarding the clerk and the attorney, so they weren't. So there's no need to go into executive session for that.
Excellent.
That was just in case. We need to post it just in case we went into executive session.
Got it. Thank you.
Any other questions? Mr. Walker, you recognize?
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I would just suggest that you are probably best represented to do so, but on behalf of the council, thank the staff for all of the hard work and logistics that's going into this, so we don't individually have to do it.
Certainly plan to do that. Thank you. Yeah. Any other comments? Yeah, I certainly plan to, and just want to just thank Mr. Brown and his staff for the effort and work regarding the retreat, for putting together material, and the individuals, an opportunity to meet many of the department heads who many of us have not met before, and just think that it's been very productive. As a matter of fact, when I left on yesterday, I had several very positive comments from council members about the information and how valuable it was. So just want to, Mr. Brown, thank you for what I think was a great job, you and your staff, and just continue on. Any other comments? And I also want to thank the public who listened in, participated, for their attentiveness, and hopefully it's been beneficial to them too. Anything else before the body? If not, I'm going to adjourn our 2021 council retreat. Thank everybody again.
Thank you.